Good morning.
Good morning. Today is Sunday,
The 19th.
the 19th of March, 23. And our talk today is cultivating your authentic self. So let's start with an opening affirmative prayer, okay?
Sure.
So we know that there's one divinity, one source, one life. It is everywhere present as energy, and it is also present within each one of us. It is present within my heart, my mind, my essence, my everything, because it is energy. And so I know that today, as we share this truth with everyone, we are being our authentic self. Our authentic self is our whole self, our spiritual self, our human self, our complete self. And we know that we share it honestly and openly, not afraid, no needing to hide or withhold anything about ourselves. So we give thanks for this knowledge about the truth of our being. We actually give thanks that we are not just bodies, we are spirit as well, eternal spirit that lives forever. And knowing this, we relax and know, I am not a body, I am free, for I am just as God created me. We give thanks, we release, and together we say,
And so it
and
is.
so it is. That last little quote or poem comes from A Course in Miracles. And it's really an important thing to remember. You know, whenever you're worried about your health, or those little thoughts creep in, or worries about anything, it's just nice to remember, I'm not a body, I'm free, I'm spirit, I'm just as God created me. And it really helps a lot of worry disappear. But the worry we're talking about today is the worry that if we show our authentic self, if we say what we really think and believe, say what we really want and don't want to everybody from friends to family to coworkers and bosses, there's that fear that, well, I might displease them. They might be unhappy with me. They might get mad at me. And so we kind of hide our authentic self and instead present what we think they'll be pleased with. We're people pleasers. Women more so than men, because we're taught to be pleasant all the time.
Smile.
And smile. Remember, smile and be friendly. I have a quote here from David Brooks. David Brooks is the commentator. He's a newspaper man.
New York Times.
New York Times. He appears on PBS Sunday, not Sunday, but PBS News often. It was always with Judy, can't think of her last name.
Woodruff.
Judy Woodruff. He was always the conservative commentator, and then they have a liberal commentator. But at any rate, he wrote a book just a couple of years ago called The Second Mountain. And this is his quote. On the surface of our lives, most of us build a hard shell, which is designed to cover fear and insecurity, and win approval and success. When you get down to the core of yourself, you find a different, more primeval country. And it is a deep yearning to care and connect. So in other words, that deeper part of us, that's end of quote, the deeper part of us is more concerned with connecting than it is showing a false front to please people and have us agree with them or them agree with us. And so another part of this title is Boundaries Build Bridges. Boundaries build bridges. And you wouldn't think so, because a boundary is a clear statement about what you want and don't want, what you will tolerate and not tolerate. And those are often the things that we're afraid people will be unhappy about us with, and so we show a false self. But if you think about it, if you think about bridges always have a side to them, a left and a right side, so that you don't fall in or over the bridge. So that's a boundary. and that keeps you safe. And yet the bridge connects you from one place to the other, or in this metaphor, one person to another. So when you learn to do honest boundaries, set limits, we all set limits with our kids, but we often fail to set limits with our spouse, our mate, or any superiors at work. And so that's what we're going to be talking about, why that's vitally important to connect you with them. And Bob had some great metaphors to better understand this word boundaries, because it can be a confusing word when you're talking about relationships.
I want to go back to what you were saying earlier, though, and talk about, I had an early psychiatrist who I worked with because I was in training, and he was brilliant, and he said there's only three things that are really important, and I said, in therapy, and I said, what is that? He said, safety, safety, and safety. And what he was telling me became really, really more and more important in my life as I continued to learn and grow, that when we don't feel safe, we then withdraw, or we isolate, or we insulate, or we try to do something in order to be protected from potential danger. The dangers we face today are not like the dangers we used to face. The danger we used to face was an animal bigger than us that could kill us. And now the dangers we face are rejection laws, media being, what do they call it when you're closed out, or when there's a name for that, but people will go after somebody and just ruin their name and ruin them. So we have a lot of primal
Canceled
culture, that kind of culture that says, if you don't please me, you don't say what I want to hear, you're not the way I want you to be, then I'm going to cancel you. And that's our worst fear, is being canceled. And that is really, really important. But before we get into more of that, I'd want to say that the first question you want to ask yourself whenever you're in a situation where that fear rises up is it true that there is a danger here? Is it true that there is a risk here for me? Because if there is, you can opt out. You can say, I'm not going to do this. Or in many cases, I think we have reactions to things that are being said and done around us that actually don't have anything to do with us. Mm-hmm. We're simply reacting to the world around us. I was at work the other day, and one of the individuals sitting at my table creating was talking about liberals and what they've done to the world and how they're just ruining everything. And he listed all the things. I said, "Oh my God, that's scary." He said, "It is." I said, "I had no idea I was doing all those things." And he said, "What?" I said, "Well, I've been a liberal all my life, and I've never done any of those things, so I don't know. Is it contagious? Will I start doing these things?" And he looked at me with squinted eyes like, "Oh, you're one of them." And I said, "Oh, I've been one of them for a long time, but I'm also one of you." And it was very confusing for him, and he wasn't happy with the idea that I could identify who I was. But here's the deal. There's often a way you can identify your truth and have it be safe. You have to look for how to do that. Not saying what you believe and saying what's true for you often keeps you hidden from and actually has you even feel more unsafe. Allowing yourself to speak your truth when you figure out how to do that in a way that isn't harmful or isn't going to hurt you, that is really helpful. The boundaries I was thinking about when we were talking, Judith and I were talking over coffee this morning, was that you go to a zoo, and the most interesting thing about a zoo is that there are boundaries between all of the animals. You could never get as many animals together in one place if you didn't have boundaries. And they'll often walk up to the wall, look at the animal they normally would eat, and say, "Oh, I guess I can't do that." And in some cases, they even learn to get along. In some cases, in the zoos, they've actually found some species of animals that don't eat others that they can put together. And it's actually helped them to become more social. They brought, I don't know what kind of a mammal it was. I think it was a kind of otter family, a mink family, in with the chimpanzees. And the chimpanzees wouldn't eat them, but they loved playing with them. They loved seeing them. And so
the pets having pets.
The pets having pets, but we have to ask ourselves, is it safe? And if it is safe, what do I want to say, and can I be my authentic self? And if it's not safe, what is there about it that I need? That I need to do? What boundary do I need to create? What do I need to say or do that would help it be safe? Boundaries aren't designed to separate people. They're actually designed to have people be closer together. And the closeness that we experience is when there's rules and boundaries. I was listening to somebody talking, who's a member of our church family here earlier, and I was fascinated when she said, I have a family member that we can talk, but we have to know what the topic is, how long it's going to be, what the parameters are for it, and we have to agree it's got to be neutral, or we can't talk. I don't even know whether this person has to have a neutral space to do it in. What I was impressed with is the effort being spent to try to
connect.
find a way to connect
Yeah.
and have it be safe.
Yeah.
And so it seems foolish. You mean we've got to discuss what we can talk about? Either that or we don't ever talk. We've got to have rules about how we're going to communicate. Yes, because it's not safe otherwise. Oh, okay. So I think once we get past the idea that rules and boundaries are bad, or that we shouldn't
Or
have to have
dangerous,
any, or
yeah.
dangerous, I think we then can communicate honestly.
I've got to share because I just accidentally saw something on your computer today.
Oh my God,
And a
no.
mother was
Oh yeah.
talking about how she kept her children from lying to her. And it was because she made it safe for them. They didn't feel like they had to make up a story or they were going to get blamed and punished. And I don't know how old the child was, but she had a little boy who had put a stuffed toy down the toilet.
Which is a good idea. Yeah. They get clean.
And instead of reacting like most of us do, like, what are you doing? Don't ever do that again, and all this stuff that we might do. She just kept making it safe for him. And she said,
Yeah.
next time, let's leave your toys out of the bathroom because, but she didn't get upset. She didn't yell. She said, if I were to do that, then he wouldn't feel safe telling me the truth. And I would be teaching him to lie to me. So I just thought it was brilliant. She was an Asian woman. I think Asians are often very strict with what they expect of their children with grades and whatnot, but they're generally, the ones I've known are very nonviolent. they're very gentle.
Well,
And
it's a big generalization, but I think where that
it is.
but I think where that may even have benefit is if you look in many countries in Asia, lots and lots of people live very, very close together. And because they live so close together, they even have a stronger desire to figure out how to get along together than I think when you have an acre of land. There's places in the country where people think very differently about those people who live in the city because they've never had that experience. And they've got lots and lots of space. It's hard when you go Midwest to actually think about there being a space problem.
Yeah.
When you look in the mountains and you can look forever and ever, or the desert.
Well, they also have, they don't have this rugged individualism that we do in this country, that it's more of a how do we get along culture. But I want to go back to, since they're so crowded, to your metaphor of the expressway.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I think actually the truth is we're all here. Any of you who've ever driven are here because we agreed on a boundary, and that was when that yellow line was separated the lanes. We decided, even though there was no cars in the left lane that's going the opposite way, we wouldn't drive in it. And to the extent that we keep our agreement to stop at stop signs, make turns with a signal light on, we'll talk later about what that's actually for, the signal light. And to the extent that we agree to those rules on the highway, we get to be very close together and survive. The other thing that fascinates me is if you take a look at a day on the expressway where we've got, in our area, we've got 5 lanes going the same direction. You can look over 5 lanes and see trucks, cars, sports cars, big cars, little cars, old cars, cars that smoke, cars that are brand new, all able to get along together on the highway going the same direction as long as they each agree to stay in their lane. And a lot of what we're talking about is really trying to figure out what your lane is and staying in that lane, feeling safe in that lane so that you can then express who you are. And you can. The road is a good example of that. The other piece of that is that when you choose a road, whether you mean to or not, you're choosing the conditions that are going to be affecting you. We often choose a road and then say, I didn't sign up for this. Well, actually, what we don't know is when we sign up for something, we then have to discover what the rules are very often to go with that. And if we're going to make adjustments or we're going to be negotiate or we're going to say, this is the road not for me, and turn around and leave. But we do actually make many more choices than we think. And part of our fear is we'll make a wrong choice. And part of our ability is incredible resilience and the ability to figure out how to manage situations that are difficult.
I have another quote in that regard by Ken Wilber, who is, a real spiritual thinker, leader. And he said, every decision we make Our every action, our every word is based on the construction, conscious or unconscious, of boundaries. To make a decision means to draw a boundary line between what to choose and what not to choose. And that's from a book I guess he wrote called No Boundary. But if every decision you make is a boundary, we make lots of those. And so that's from someone who had a hard time creating boundaries in my life. That's a profound concept to me. My family was one where my father made all the decisions and nobody dared question him. And not only he, but all of his siblings and all of my cousins, because my father had six. There were six in his family, and all of them basically had the same rules that what they were raised with, which was the father rules, and you don't question, and you don't disagree. And so I grew up not knowing I had the right to disagree, not knowing I had the right to say, I don't want to do that, I want to do this. And those are setting boundaries. Those are saying how you will live and how you will not live. Well, especially when the man was the only breadwinner in the family, women had very little choice other than to do what they wanted. And so I just did that from that to my first marriage of learning to obey, and shut up and not even show my unhappiness about what the rules of the house were. So that's something I had to learn. And it was interesting because I was very assertive in school. I was assertive in the workplace, usually because it was my business. I tended to want to be self-employed. Guess why? And so then it was interesting that at home, though, I brought that same compliance and the same passivity. Because if you're not honestly expressing your true self, you're just shutting up and putting up and shutting up, you are being passive. So there's a lot of confusion about the difference between passive, assertive, and aggressive. And aggressive, I thought if I weren't passive, I'd be being aggressive, and I would be punished for it or have bad consequences. I didn't know that there's this middle ground called assertive, which is where you say what you want, which is respecting your rights, and at the same time respect the rights of others. You don't trample on the others. I wouldn't go in and say to a boss, well, I don't care what your rules are. This is what I want to do.
Right.
You have to use some
Mi-
common sense.
Mind over matter. I don't mind. You don't
Yeah,
matter. Right.
that's right. But so it's a challenge. But I did have the skills at school and at work. So when I learned that I could do that in my personal home life and not be dangerous, have it not be dangerous to me, then that's the key. It had to be
Yeah.
safe to learn to do it.
I want to move this into our spiritual world, because in our spiritual world, if we're not careful, we have the same relationship with our higher power or divine mind, or
Yeah, we will
with God, or
project that.
or with Jesus, or whatever that is that you have as your touchstone for your spirituality. If you're passive, or you believe that it's all up to somebody else, then it's really you're not practicing your spirituality. You're practicing being as safe as you can, hoping someone else will meet your needs rather than yourself. One of the worst things that, well, not worst things, one of the things I remember, one of my clients would come in regularly, always late. And I would say, we need to have you on time because it's your session. And she complained, and I can't, traffic and whatever. So one day she came in early and she said, I got here on time. I said, I know it's one. She said, oh, thank Jesus. I said, let's back up a little bit. How many times in your life do you have something happen to you that's really good that Jesus gets the credit? She said, always. And how many times do you do something that's negative and Jesus gets the credit? Never. It's always my fault. So you're at fault for all the bad things that happen in your world, and Jesus is at fault for all the good things that happen. She said, I never thought of it that way. So then what if you, because you have divine qualities, because you were made right, because you're an aspect or a dimension of God, what if you were responsible for being on time? Wow. I might not be late anymore. And the breakthrough she had was she said, I can't really win because winning is not supposed to be for me. So I really don't care how often or how badly I lose because I can't win. And so what was interesting is from that point on, she would make all of her appointments in time. I said, whose fault is it now? She said, it's mine. We have to own our spirituality as well as the life we're living around. But the relationship you have with your parents very often looks like the relationship we have with God. A lot of people have a lot of fear of their parents, fear that they're going to be made wrong, they won't qualify, they're going to get hurt, they're going to get punished. And very often in the family that they're from, they have a really good reason for feeling that way. They often then have a relationship with God that's they're afraid God's going to turn on them, God is going to burn them, God's going to do bad. And if you really want to go way out on the limb with it, then all you have to do is find biblical scripture that'll talk about who got burned for what they did, or who's being punished. And so there's lots in the Bible to help you believe that you're not in charge, you're not good enough, you don't qualify, and you shouldn't even consider yourself, but you could turn it all over to whatever that deity is. I'd say turn it back over to yourself and say, if I was made right, if I have everything that I need to have a life, then I'm not going to give away my power. I'm going to say, thank you, God, working with and through me. But I think that's a really important piece. Look at your relationship with your spirituality and ask yourself if it's the same relationship you have in the world. One is if it isn't, which one is better? How does it work, and would you like to have more of that?
Once you are aware of this, when you watch any media that has to do with relationships, just notice who's afraid to set boundaries, who risks setting a boundary, saying what they really want, even if they think it might offend the other. It's really interesting to observe. And this quote is from Anna Taylor. It really describes what we're talking about with that. And she says, love yourself enough to set boundaries. Your time and energy are precious. You get to choose how you use it. You teach people how to treat you by deciding what you will and won't accept. I'd like you to take that into all your relationships that can be difficult. What are you choosing to accept? What are you willing to accept? Or when do you put your foot down and say, I'm not willing to accept this kind of treatment, or this kind of rule breaking, or this kind of putting myself second?
I'm thinking of the young woman who was very, very upset with the man that she was with. He was upset with her, and she said, I come into the apartment, I cleaned the kitchen, I fixed your breakfast, I brought it into the bedroom, I set it on the bed, and you're mad at me? And he said, yes, because you live next door and I didn't give you a key and I've never invited you into the apartment. I don't really know you. What is this? I'm being considerate and thoughtful. I think it's absurd. But we have relationships often like that, where the person simply comes in and does what they do. I think, really? Yeah. And we have lots
But
of...
we teach people how to treat us, so we have to tell them when we're not happy with
we have
them.
lots of rules we don't think about. When you have little kids and you go into the bathroom and you close the door, say, I'm closing the door, I'll be out in a minute. What would it be like with adults, you say, I'm going to the bathroom, I'll go with you. It's like, really? Yeah, I can stand here and talk and watch you, sure. No, we have rules, we have boundaries. Most of the boundaries we don't have to talk about enforcing them because they're social boundaries we've all agreed on. And because of that, it's really easy to think we don't need to set any. If you loved me, if you really loved me, we wouldn't have to create boundaries. It would just be this wonderful knowing. And it would be great if you could read minds, but since you can't read minds, it doesn't work that way.
I want to say one last thing about our spirituality before we close, and that is being authentic does not mean proselytizing, where you go out and try to convince everybody else that they should believe what you believe.
And that they're wrong.
And by the way, you're wrong.
Yeah.
And so we do not proselytize. We don't go around. I rarely talk about what I believe spiritually unless someone asks. If they ask, I'm very happy to share. But it's none of my business what their spiritual beliefs are, and I don't believe it's my job to change their spiritual beliefs.
What I believe,
we're all in the right place at the right time.
What I believe is that if you are living your spirituality it will be inevitable that people will ask you what you believe. People, because if you're a demonstration of the kind of principles that we teach, people want to know more about how that happened. People will inquire, but we talk about it being the law of attraction that grows us, not taking people hostage because we want to save them, you know.
Yes, I have an example of that, but we don't have time, so it's time to close.
We're going to go to, before we close, we're going to go to share a screen.
It's the green one.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, the green one. And talk for just a minute about something that is important to us, and that is, this is a ministry that exists as a result of the support that you give it. If we don't have any support, we can't set aside the time and the resources that we need to be able to do what we're doing. So we're asking you one more time today to make an investment in this teaching and helping us move it forward in as many ways as we can.
So let's say the offertory affirmation. By the way, you can make a donation by going to our website, CSL, which stands for Center for Spiritual Living, palmbeaches.org. And there's a button on top that says ways to donate. So just know we really appreciate it. You make it possible for us to continue doing this.
Absolutely.
So my investment today is made with the full realization that God is the source of my supply and returns it to me enriched and multiplied. So it is.
Okay. And now we're going to end the
Stop
recording.
the recording, yes.